All right.
4 of you, actually. We're just missing Paul.
Oh, yeah.
Can
Got
somebody
one.
check to text him or see if he's having problems getting in?
Yeah, could someone, Christina, could you please check?
I will do that right now.
Or any of our families listening, if you could check, please.
All right, let's get started. Gary?
All right, commissioners, before we begin, a quick schedule check. The governor has scheduled a phone call for county commissioners at 3 p.m. today. You also have a policy session at that time. Would you like to just have 1 or 2 of you go to the governor's call and the other 3 of you finish your policy session? Or do you want us to reschedule the policy session so you can all be on the call?
I would say reschedule the policy session so we all can be on the call.
Martha?
What is the policy session at 3?
It's a vendor rewards policy. It basically is allowing you as county commissioners, if you have a Costco card or an airlines card, you are eligible to receive mile or points and use them personally. We can also reschedule. We can also do it earlier today because I don't think the board priorities discussion will take an hour.
Okay. Let's just try and do it before 3 then.
Is that okay then, Chair Bernard?
Yep.
Okay, so Christina, if you give a heads up to Elizabeth at 3, we'll likely do them before 2:30. And we'll aim to finish by 3 o'clock today. Okay, with that, we'll begin our first policy session. It is board priorities. I am the lead on this. And the question for you commissioners is, what policy priorities and initiatives would you like to focus on for the remaining 4 months of this calendar year by December 31st, 2020? Now, background. Of course, you have a strategic plan called Performance Clackamas. Every department has a strategic plan, but Clackamas County as an organization has a strategic plan. You met last fall to reaffirm your 5 strategic priorities in that strategic plan, and you narrowed your results you wish to achieve to 12. Your prior strategic plan had 35 results, and you narrowed it down to 12. So thank you and congratulations for that. 12 results you want to accomplish over the next 4 years.
Hey, Gary, can I stop you and ask everybody to mute because there's a lot of interruptions with Gary's talking because we're not all muted.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody was banging around with something.
Okay, is that better, commissioners? All right, very good, thank you. You have your strategic plan that has 5 strategic priorities, 12 results, and then with that, there are also,
Hey, it's not somebody making noise, it's scratchy, it's connection or something.
Yeah, is there something different on your end, Gary?
Yes, I'm at the county.
Okay.
So am I.
Okay, so it's scratchy. So it's, for whatever
There's
reason, I
nothing
don't know
you
if
do
it's
about
just your laptop or whatever, but it's scratchy.
Throw it
Okay,
out the window. Just proceed.
Okay, go ahead.
with that, you have approximately 14 other initiatives you've asked the county and staff to work on outside of your priorities. Basically, I'm asking for your help to narrow down what you would truly like to focus on for the next 4 months. Nowhere on this list, of course, have I mentioned COVID or wildfires that are occurring right now. Just like you, commissioners, staff has dropped everything to focus on the wildfires and on COVID. So I'm simply seeking your guidance of how we can help you prioritize what would you really like to accomplish in the next 4 months. I will speak for myself, but I do believe I'm speaking on behalf of the majority of staff. We are burnt out. We simply don't feel we can devote the energy or expertise you need to accomplish these many, many priorities. Every priority is important. We simply cannot do it all. So I'm being very upfront with you, and it's my duty to tell you that. You're the policymakers. We will do what you tell us to do, but I'm asking to please help me to narrow down what can we truly accomplish in the next 4 months, what can we postpone, what can we look longer term. So all this is in your staff report. I just kind of want to quickly mention the initiatives I'm talking about outside of your strategic plan. We have not yet implemented the recommendations from the Housing Affordability and Homelessness Task Force that finished last year. Their top recommendation was to have a construction excise tax in Clackamas County. We have the future of the Veterans Village. The 2-year pilot is up in 1 month, next month. Short-term rentals, internet service provider, a tobacco retail license, the construction to careers to construction project, C2P2, the Reimagine Oregon commitments, and we'll talk about that in a moment, implementing the supportive housing program, implementing the children's safety levy, should the voters approve that, implementing the transportation 2020 measure, should voters approve that, implementing the Metro Housing Bond, building 2 libraries. Those are initiatives outside of your strategic plan. Your strategic plan, of course, includes the courthouse, a sustainable budget, affordable housing units, reducing domestic violence, a climate action plan, Sunrise Gateway, Interstate 205, community prosperity pilots, serviceable development land, adequately trained workforce. I'm exhausted right here. So I'm coming to you asking for help, commissioners. Your staff cannot do this all. So I'm here to implement your direction, but I'm asking for guidance. What can we narrow down, please, over the next 4 months while this board is still in place? So I'm seeking your feedback today, commissioners.
So Gary, Paul asked, and I'm all going to tell you what my priorities are. One thing is a evergreen contract with AMR. They've been doing a great job. An evergreen contract, which you all remember, will give them stability and the county stability for years to come, as long as they meet the metrics that is required. A courthouse. I would love to secure a contract to make sure that the courthouse is built in the future. Construction excise tax, which I would love to do. I don't think we have time to do that before the end of my term. ISP, which I think we now have a plan on. I think we'll move forward. And short-term rentals. I'd love to put this behind us. I know, however, that these are very challenging times. And if we started, we'd have to start small, like a minimal licensing fee. And I won't be here to tell you what else to do after that. But I think that an STR is important. Of course, the libraries, implementing the housing bond, and the things that could maybe pass or not. Reimagine Oregon. I think that we need to get into that further. Tobacco retail licensing, frankly, I could put that aside for now. I think it won't happen when I leave, unless you guys stay together and work together to make sure it does. I think that future Veterans Village is going to be difficult to do now in the next years. A second site, I assume. Those are, for me, the STR and the ambulance and the courthouse are what I think are my priorities, because Ken, I feel, and I think you do, that ISP is got a good direction now. Otherwise, I'd sign the document today and get going on that. So I'm going to go to Ken now.
Well, first, I would look at that whole list and divide things up into what are possible to be completed in a relatively short period of time, and those things that we know are going to require a lot more time. For instance, the libraries. We know we're not going to get those done in 4 months. So that is something that, while staff may continue to put some time into them as we go forward, making them something that on a list of things to accomplish in 4 months, I think would be foolish. And I think that's true with a number of the things on that list. I'm not particularly in disagreement with Commissioner Bernard on the issues that he talked about, but I would say that we should pass a resolution or an ordinance to continue the Vets Village where it is. That is something we can do fairly quickly as an accomplishment that can be done in the 4 months. We made a,
Excuse me,
we made a-
let me just interrupt you 1 sec. I thought this was a second Veterans Village. I, of course, think this current Veteran Village should continue.
So we just need to make the decision to continue it. We made a commitment to the community on STR, on short-term rentals, that we would get this done by November. We delayed it because of COVID and things. I think we're going to have to bite the bullet and get that one done. Staff are working on the ISP CBX, and I think, as Commissioner Bernard said, that they can continue to focus on that. The only other one that I don't want to lose the opportunity on, because it will help our workforce partnership, and indirectly then relates to the employers having an adequately trained workforce, is the C2P2. So I guess that would be, yeah, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be 6 items that seem to be things that we could move forward on. The courthouse may take a little longer, I suspect, because there's discussions with finance on that one. But really, if you look at that list, there's things that are obviously and clearly long-term that are not going to get done in 4 months. And then there's some very specific things that can be done in 4 months. So that would kind of be my list.
You're muted, Jim.
Paul,
So I know I missed the first few minutes, but I think we're talking 2 different things. I didn't think this is what was the question, what we want to do in the next 4 months, or was the question was getting back to Gary's point. I thought, unless I missed something early on, I thought Gary's point is that we've added on too many things, whether it's 4 months worth of work or whether it's a year's worth of work or 2 years worth. We've added on a lot of things beyond the 12 that we actually were trying to get less of, so they can be more effective at finishing those 12 or 10 or whatever, which is 12. But there's a saying, is it quantity or is it quality? Because you're going to sacrifice, if it's all about quality or quantity, you're going to sacrifice quality. And we're also putting staff in an untenable position of not actually completing what our main priorities are. So there's a difference between our main priorities, our goals, our high-end goals, and our smaller priorities, if you want to call them that, these short-term things. But help me out, Gary. Were you asking for what we want to do in the next 4 months, or were you trying to get some narrowing so you could actually get your work done?
Both of those. The first question, what do you want to accomplish in the next 4 months, knowing time is short and staff capacity is low? And then, yes, you said it better than I did, Commissioner. Commissioners, if you're going to keep adding and adding and adding, then you shouldn't have a plan in the first place, respectfully, because it's why prioritize? If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And I would add quickly to Commissioner Humberston's earlier comment, you're right, Commissioner, many of these are long-term projects, but staff is putting a lot of energy into it, a lot of energy into all 25 of these things I just mentioned, even if they're longer-term projects. So it's where do you want staff to focus their time over the next 4 months and then looking beyond that?
Okay, well, thank you for the clarification, Gary. One thing I do want to clear up right away, we never talked about having 2 veterans villages, and I don't think that's was ever even discussed or even necessary, right? 1 is enough. We're not even probably going to ever get to 30 at that one particular site. I think the long-term initiative, or what we conveyed to the community, was that particular location would be short-term, and then we would find a permanent location in the future. And I think we're on year 2, and by year 3, that we would have another site. And that's why we bought those modulars. everything there is designed to be mobile so we can get and move it to the permanent site, not a second site, but a permanent site. So just want to put clarification on that. So I don't have, frankly, I think we have a lot on our plate. I don't have a wish list to get done between now and the end of the year. I think that between all these crises, between the COVID and now these firefights and the impacts and the people that are being displaced because of that, on top of the rioting, on top of the economic conditions that we're all under, we're going to have a heck of a time even implementing all the things that have been added on, just we all talked about, which gets down to the homeless measure and the supportive services measure. And if these two measures pass, as Gary alluded to, that's going to be even more work. So I think staff's got too much on their plate now. So adding on a 4-month wish list is, to me, is a little bit shocking. That, I mean, I understand that. Don't get me wrong. I understand what 4 months is or what the next 4, and I don't want to dismiss any of that. But my gosh, we're gonna have to set aside and take away and lose momentum on something if we start adding on all these other things. I think that's what Gary's really trying to say is we have to narrow it, not add to it. I don't want to add anything.
Okay, can I respond to that, please? Since what he asked us for was what could be done in the next 4 months. He didn't say we had to take any of the goals off long term. Just what could we do in the next 4 months? Don't expect staff to spend a whole bunch of time on one of these long-term things in the next 4 months. They would be putting their energy into the shorter term things that might actually be able to get accomplished over the next 4 months. At least that's what I understood the request to be.
Yep.
And that's why I suggested the 4 or 5 things that I did, some of which are the same as Commissioner Bernard's. I don't know what other people might suggest, but I mean, did I miss the point, Gary?
So
Please.
I'm sorry for the confusion. I really have 2 requests for you today. The first, what would you like to, look, this board will cease to exist in 4 months. There'll be a different board in January. What would this board like to accomplish, get done in the next 3 to 4 months? That's not a lot of time. Second, I'm asking for your help. You have too many priorities and staff cannot stay on top of all of them. So please, maybe let's focus on the first question first. What do you as a board would like staff to help you accomplish in the next 3 to 4 months? And then we can have a second conversation today and ongoing. How do we narrow down your priority list?
Martha.
Going to be noisy here, but you're going to have to bear with me. Someone just called at my door. I will be right back, so let someone else speak so I can tell you what's going on here.
Okay.
I'll be back and I have my ideas.
So, Paul, you asked what my priorities were in the next 4 months, and I'm telling you today that AMR evergreen contract, STRs, and Courthouse. That's it. By the way, AMR, we're working on it already. I don't think that's going to take a lot of time. The evergreen contract, we have good examples. The Courthouse is a current priority, and STRs are also a current priority, correct, Gary? So I'm not adding a thing except AMR evergreen. I just think that for the future of the county, and from what I heard, securing that AMR contract for the future would be a good thing for you guys and for the county. That's all.
Yeah, well, I just want to, yeah, thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. I just want to clarify. I didn't, out of the blue, ask you, by the way, Jim, what do you want to get done in the last 4 months? Or what you mentioned at a meeting that I have my 5 priorities, and I said, I'd like to know what those are.
Yeah, and I'm telling you.
So therefore, tell me what they are. I did ask, by the way, I want to know what you want to get done in the next 4 months. That's a different nuance, but I just want the record to show that all I asked for was when you mentioned the 5 priorities, what they were, so I could understand what that was. That's all.
I actually took off a couple because of what Gary said. And actually, they are on the list also. But for me, in the next 4 months, I think we could accomplish 3 of these. The courthouse might be more challenging, but I'd sure like to get that secured before I leave. The other stuff, I mean, I agree with Gary. We need to have focused priorities, and this fire and the issue with COVID has changed, should change some of those priorities because of the our future is so unsure. Anyway, Martha, you're back.
It's been one of those days with people in and out. So I'm just going to be direct here. I'm not interested in tobacco retail. Courthouse, I think we're down the road to Mandalay on that one. Ambulance, I think, is a good idea. Veterans Village, I'm okay with that. Short-term rentals and tobacco retail are 2 things I would just drop off that list. And also implementing the recommendations of the Housing Affordability and Homelessness Task Force. Because quite frankly, we veered off of what we had planned to do for homelessness because of external influences. So that's something I'm thinking we've done plenty, and we're going to have more than enough to implement should any of these measures pass, you know, as well as that goes. So I would just drop those. I'm not particularly interested in working on that as a commission. Reimagine Oregon commitments, or Oregon, you know, that piece, we're going to have to decide who's going to be the point persons. I'm assuming there's going to be more than one person. One thing that I tried to have added with the children's levy, which was summarily dismissed and actually with intent taken out, was childcare. I personally am sitting on the workforce board where that's their main priority. So I'm going to pursue that without the help of the county at this point, because it's just something that needs to happen. So I'm not going to ask for any staff. I'm not going to ask for any money. I'm not going to go there. But that is something that we're hearing from the ground up, from people who are suffering out there. And it's also something that our workforce board has made one of their top priorities. But it does not have to be a commission priority. I am very disappointed in the children's levy folks, because I was astounded that they did not feel that that was part of what they want to do. And also that came out of the blue. It was not one of our original priorities. So I also think we need to have more self-discipline, that as we do these, that we don't keep adding things because of external things that kind of jump up to hit us in the face. So there's my cranky opinion.
Sonia, would you like to add anything?
So I would like the courthouse to get along the way of more formalizing our public-private partnership with the P3. I do think we are implementing the recommendations of the Homelessness and Housing Task Force, because one of their main recommendations was a source of flexible dollars and rent assistance, and the 26-210 accomplishes a big chunk of what they were recommending. So I think we're well on the way of doing that. Some of this stuff, I mean, we don't have a choice. It doesn't have to be prioritized in the next 4 months, but we're moving ahead with the libraries, the Metro housing bond, I mean, if the Metro Get Moving 2020 passes, we're going to have to do that. But I don't know that it will pass. And then the Reimagine Oregon commitments, from when we met with staff, it looked like a lot of those things staff was already prioritizing, and this was a way to create more accountability around that publicly and a means to communicate it. So it seemed to me that most of that was on the way, but we can go through that more directly with Martine here in a little bit. It's the short-term rentals. I mean, it seems like I was ready to move forward with that and pass that, like, and it kept getting stopped. I mean, I just wish we could have some consensus around it and do what we need to do, because we did make a commitment to the community about that. And then around the Veterans Village, I'm not sure what else, Gary, we have to do about that, but just keep the status quo. And I don't know, is there any other input that I need to do? I'm okay with doing an AMR evergreen like Jim wanted to do. But I guess in the next 4 months, I would like to see us, the courthouse is a big priority. And then we just think that, Gary, I don't think we have a choice. We have to put on our local implementation plan for the supportive housing dollars. That's going to be required. So I don't know why we're asking us, we have to do certain things. So help me.
Yes, I'd like to channel Marv Wiedner, our facilitator for Managing for Results. You remember him? I've actually talked to him. So what he would tell you is, that's great. That means you're taking 2 things off your strategic plan to cover for the Metro 2020, for the supportive housing services. Since those have been added, you now take 2 off. I'm not suggesting we do that today, but I am suggesting you keep adding and adding and adding, and it comes to a capacity issue, and staff cannot deliver for you.
Well, the homeless services is in our plan about reducing chronic homelessness. That is part of our retreat. And so those are just things that we've done that are there as opportunities to move us ahead on what we had decided.
That is correct, as is the Metro 2020. That would help support the Sunrise Project, and that's on your goals. They're all intertwined. Look, I work for you, commissioners. I want to make that clear. I'm just telling you, I'm being upfront with you. If I don't tell you, who will? Your staff, your 2,400 staff are overwhelmed. So I'm just asking to help pace the amount of accomplishments you'd like to achieve.
Well, could we at least have a commitment from as a commission, that we don't start willy-nilly running after the newest shiny object that pops up in front of us? I mean, I think that's what the problem is. You know, we say one thing and then we kind of get off to a whole nother thing, and we can't, as I said, I've been extremely frustrated with that. So I don't know what to tell you. I told you I would get rid of short-term rentals, tobacco retail. I'm not expecting anything for childcare and workforce. AMR makes sense. And then the courthouse. And the only reason I would say yes to the courthouse is because, frankly, it's a death trap. But I am not particularly interested in building buildings just for building's sake.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, Paul, I want to clear something up, and I think somebody else mentioned it. I thought we were talking about a second village, not renewing the current village. I totally support, continuing that for now. So just clarify that. Paul, you're up.
Yeah, so, well, thanks. So now I have a better understanding. Appreciate all that. I want to build on Martha's point, the point that she made, and just build on that. But I want to say something first, and that is that, long term, it's important that we get the county financial situation in a manageable position. And what I mean by that is that and I've been saying this for years, and now we recognize that it's a reality, and that is that expenses are outpacing revenues, and we need to bring that into line. And that means that as those operating expenses, staff, everything else associated with that goes up, and that compression between what we have for resources means that at some point we'll have less staff to do the same amount of work as before. So that's a reality, and that gets to capacity, which is one of Gary's points, is capacity. So long term, short term, that's a reality that we need to face. Okay. So this narrowing and slimming down and living within our means is just that. It's about expenses, projects, you know, our day-to-day responsibilities, all of that. So getting our fiscal house in order is incredibly important. But doing things that exacerbate it in the negative way are of concern to me, that we ought to either slow down or be very thoughtful about what we do and don't do. And so the example we made today, when we spoke about the possibility of the legislature cutting services, and it'll be backfilled by the homeless services measure, which might be us adding staff, adding expenses, adding work. And at the end of the day, the service level could possibly, hopefully not, be a net zero gain. Is that sustainable? You know, so I don't want to set ourselves up on a number of these things in a way that we can't sustain what it is we need to do. So I agree. I have no problem with Jim's suggestion of evergreen that contract, the AMR contract. I'm good with that. We're not going to complete the courthouse in the next 4 months, but we need to make sure that we shepherd that project through. We're not going to complete ISP in the next 4 months, but we need to make sure we shepherd that through and get that going. The Veterans Village, it sounds like we cleared that up. But we do need next year to look for a permanent site and start getting that in our view shed as far as how we tackle that. So those are things that just jump out to me that we ought to be doing. And I want to bring us back to my earlier point is that amid these emergencies or these crises that we have in front of us, and I'm going to add one to it that hopefully does not impact the county. Indirectly, it already is. Number one, we've got this COVID issue, and we didn't get our fair share of CARES Act funding, so we are negative in that sense. And I'm not confident we're going to get full reimbursement. I'm worried about that. Number two, we have the fire emergency and the people that are being displaced. That's going to create some havoc. That's going to be some property tax revenue loss for every structure that goes down. That's not taxable at the full rate any longer. We need to think about that. Insurance, maybe some of these are insured, maybe, I'm sure not all of them are insured. And the third one that's impacting us are these protests and riots and the violence that's taking place in Portland. And I'm worried about it trickling down in our neck of the woods as well. So this is all creating instability. This is a load on our law enforcement. It's creating havoc everywhere. And who pays for that? Our taxpayers pay for that. It comes out of our general fund. So these are things systematically in a holistic sense that all impact that, and let alone all the priorities that we've given Gary and our staff to do in the first place. So I don't want to add anything to the list, and I don't mind putting some emphasis on those three that I mentioned, but I will stop there.
Okay.
Hasn't 2020 been a great year?
You know what? Early last week I was saying, I think the worst of 2020 is over, and then here come the fires.
And so this is your fault.
Yeah. I'm going to take responsibility for that.
So Gary, do you have direction? Do you think we helped?
Actually, believe it or not, you did. This has been a very good conversation. So here's what I'm hearing, and here's what I propose. So as far as your short-term initiatives you'd like to accomplish, I'm hearing almost all of you, the ambulance contract. Moving forward on the courthouse planning, you actually do have a potential decision point in December. So we're going to bring you that data in December, and that's when you can decide what you want to do. We're on track to do that. The Vets Village, and yes, I think I see the error. I put 2-year pilot project on the staff report, and maybe that was misunderstood to be 2 Vets Villages. But I think you basically made that decision. You want to continue, but we'll formalize that. And then not all of you, but most of you said short-term rentals, and then the C2, P2. So right there, that's 5. We can accomplish those 5 things in 4 months. That's pretty simple. And then I would suggest, really, with respect, Chair Bernard, when the new board is seated in January, we'll review the prior strategic plan, these other 14 things I've listed, and that board will narrow it down and really stay really focused. So yep. I feel I have direction on where we're going forward for the next 3 months. Yes.
Okay. And Gary, just to clarify from my perspective, I'm not in support of short-term rentals, so they can keep that on if that's the majority of the board, but I have no interest in seeing that move forward.
Okay.
So I'll be a no matter what, so.
Thank you. If I may, commissioners, I would like to use the remainder of this time to have Martine Koblenz come in, please, and give you some guidance for the Reimagine Oregon commitments, because you do have a meeting this Friday with this group again. Again, I'll say many of these are already in progress, but again, that was not on the 5 things you just described. So I want to be mindful of the capacity of what we can accomplish on this list and what's going to take a larger lift. So Martine can help us walk through this here. And she sent you an email memo about that earlier today. So Martine, we only have about 20 minutes, but can you please lead the conversation on this?
Yes, hi, thank you, Gary, and good afternoon, commissioners. Hope you all are getting sleep. So I did send a memo last night, just sharing, recapping the last Reimagine meeting that took place while you were on recess. So just to recap a little bit, again, I wanted to just let you know that they put out a survey. That survey is going to close on September 11th, and it's focusing on, it's asking residents from up to 14 different counties in Oregon what residents think the priorities should be in thinking about reimagining Oregon and reimagining safety in response to the protests. So that survey will be coming out, and there are specific areas that require your attention, mainly because some of the areas that are outlined on the spreadsheet talk about either immediate action or action that would take place within 30 to 90 days. And I recognize that it could be a combination of either a staff person or one of you or someone from Reimagine Group putting in those deadlines. I wanted to make sure that you all had an opportunity together to see that and to talk about, you know, again, what are your priorities and whether or not those deadlines are realistic, and whether or not the things that are outlined on that spreadsheet are in fact items that you are committing to do. And if you are committing to do them, which of the commissioners will take lead on those items? And so I outlined what those items are, specifically the ones I'm focusing on, the ones that say either immediate action or within the 30 to 90 day deadline, because those are the items that they are going to want you all to report back on for this Friday's meeting, September 11th. So do you all have that in front of you? Would you like me to go through each of those lines that I outlined, or how?
Well, I missed that last join meeting group. So I was kind of surprised to see that we had committed to that much. I didn't know that we had done that. And I did read your memo last night, Martine. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I, not dissimilar to what Gary was talking about earlier, I'm just really wondering about our capacity to do that, and how much of that applies to local governments versus the state. Because I thought from my previous participation in previous meetings that a lot of what they were looking for was reform in the justice system and things that are really not in our wheelhouse. So, and I had put my name down for something that apparently was not their priority, and that was the issue of displacement, gentrification, land use, and transportation policies. And I put my name down to that, but that was not on their list then as far as a priority, and apparently it still is not, which is fine. But because that was in my wheelhouse, I put that there, and the balance of those are not really in my wheelhouse. But I'm supportive of a number of the principles, but how we get there and who does that work and who does that heavy lift, I'm not sure.
So I want to clarify a couple of things that you said, so thank you for sharing that. One is the last meeting was not about adding new items. So those items were already on the spreadsheet. Who put them on, how they got there, I'm not exactly sure. But the last meeting was really all about updating where folks are at, where all the jurisdictions are at with regards to the commitments that were on the spreadsheet. To your point around the anti-displacement, the only reason I did not list this on the memo is because that was not listed on the spreadsheet as an immediate action to take or within the 30 to 90 days. So this is what I'm trying to bring to you all. You all ultimately get to decide what the timeline can be or should be with regards to each of these items. So if as a board you decide that anti-displacement is a priority that should take place within within that shorter timeline, you can make that decision. I just want to make sure that you have clarity about what you're committing to do, whether the timeline is reasonable, and who's going to take lead on each of those items.
So Ken had his hand up.
The thing that I recall was that we pretty much the principles were outlined to us from the community groups that met prior to you coming on board, Martine. The timelines were also put in there, but the board, I don't recall us ever actually saying we agreed to those timelines. They were suggested timelines, but not certainly something that we considered. And certainly I didn't consider something we were locked into. Given the circumstances that we are in currently with COVID and the fires and everything else that is on our plates, and particularly on staff's plates, I would have to say that those timelines will have to go by the wayside. We will have to be much more flexible as to what we can do and when we can do it and how we can do it and how we incrementally work those principles into our systems. So we may need to rethink how we approach this and be realistic in our expectations when it comes to timelines. As Gary's pointed out, staff have a heck of a lot on their plates at this point in time. And I'm not sure how much staff time is available to invest in some of the shorter term goals that are outlined there. It isn't to say that we shouldn't strive to achieve those goals. I believe that every one of us is committed to achieving those goals. But how much resources at this moment in time we can put into it, that's a whole other question. And so I'm suggesting to you that you maybe look at how do we begin this process without necessarily having locked in timelines.
Okay, so Paul and then Sonia.
I'm glad Sonia's chiming in. I want to just say something. At the last meeting that I was at, Sonia and I were part of, and I believe one or two staff members were a part of that. At that point in time, the group had that spreadsheet, that live interactive spreadsheet in which we could adjust those timelines, and we'd go online anytime and put our names down or take things off and on. So that was the status at that point in time. And we agreed to take some of those items, and some of those are familiar, bring them back to the board, discuss them, and then have the board say, what can we work on, and then take off and on and adjust on the live spreadsheet thereafter. So Sonia and I recall us doing just that. We brought it back to the board for discussion. And I don't know what follow-up took place back to the spreadsheet as far as updating those promises or not promises, what we could do or not do. And I haven't attended one since. So I'll let Sonia take it from there. But Sonia?
Excellent opening, Paul. Paul's right. We brought this all back, and if you recall, Jill Smith went through and said what was well underway, so this was absolutely accomplishable within the immediate time frame. And Gary, I believe you weighed in on the racial impact statements and said that was absolutely accomplishable. So we went through this line item by line item and made that decision, of which during our break I did participate in the meeting, and Martine was there listening, and I let everyone know that our board went through all of these, and the board made the decision that we were adhering to this time frame. So we did this. It was before Martine, but if we're going to backpedal on it, I think we need a little more information because some of this, you guys, has already been accomplished. It's already been our work. We've already been well on our way of prioritizing these things. So in some ways, it was just an added bonus that others in the community said, hey, counties, you need to prioritize this. And we could say, oh, yes, absolutely. And we can accomplish this, and we have. So that's my recollection of how this played out.
And my confusion is I keep looking for the spreadsheet and I can't find it. So I don't know if the rest of you have it in front of you or not.
It's
So Martha, oh, go ahead, Martine.
No, yeah, Martine.
Do you have the memo I sent yesterday? There's a link to the spreadsheet in there.
Okay, I guess it must be under you. Tracy has given me a whole list of links and materials for today, and it wasn't included with that.
Oh, okay.
Do I need to look at under probably your email then?
Here, I will put it in the chat for you.
Okay.
I just emailed you, Commissioner, right now.
Okay. Okay, great.
All right. That would be helpful. For some reason, I've looked through every piece I have here, and it's not there. So, okay.
Can I just say,
Okay.
just to answer real quick what Commissioner Fisher was saying, this is another opportunity just to clarify then what areas have actually been accomplished, and now that we've lived and learned which areas we thought we could accomplish in the 30 to 90 or immediate, which we need to reevaluate and reassess and determine whether or not that timeline is reasonable. And then assigning a point person for those areas as a place of who would be the point for accountability or for communication.
And then my only thought is that we really relied on Jill for the housing stuff and some of the culturally specific for maternal child health and culturally specific mental health, that those things were well underway. And so those would be immediately accomplished. I want a new word called accomplishable. So
those were not added because we already have that those are done. Okay. So the ones that I added are the housing and homelessness line 12 and 13 and 15, and the legislative process lines 23 through 25. It is reflecting in the spreadsheet. Many of the things reflect that the items are already done. So yes, well done, it's great. I'm just reflecting the items that do not have an update on the status yet and that have a more immediate timeline.
Well, then again, getting input from staff, because I know that especially on the sweeps, they've done so much work and working with law enforcement, and that was such a priority that, especially during COVID, that may already be accomplished too. I mean, we as a board can't make these decisions without more information.
Okay, Gary?
Yep, I have a suggestion for the commissioners attending the meeting on Friday. And yes, Commissioner Fisher, you're right. We've already went through all this with the board and staff on every one of these recommendations and whether a timeline would be at the county. I would suggest what's changed, of course, is wildfires. That's kind of even now for all of us, put everything kind of on hold. I think you could say that we are moving forward on these recommendations. We've made our commitments at the county. We're going to do our best to meet our original timelines, but we can't hold to that because of the wildfires. That's our priority, to protect the health and safety of all of our residents. And ultimately, and you can say this more delicately than I'm about to, you're accountable to the public of Clackamas County, not the people on this call on Friday. So you will achieve these accomplishments. You've already said that. You'll do them as efficiently as you can, and you will set the timelines. So we're going to have to extend some of these timelines because of these unexpected events, but we're still moving forward on these priorities. Because yes, these are all things we're doing anyway, Clackamas County. It's not really new, going back to what you just talked about 30 minutes ago. So I at least am comfortable with what's on your list, our progress. I think Martine's point is some of them you had said 30 to 60 days, that time's already up. And clearly we didn't meet it and you're not going to. But again, I don't think that's as urgent for your Friday meeting Your statement should be, we are committed to achieving these results, and we're going to do them as efficiently as we can under the challenges that are facing our entire nation and our state right now. That's my advice. Thank you.
So, Martine, I have a question, Gary. We have the Coalition of Communities of Color doing outreach as we speak. So are they really kind of going to be one of the key implementers of some of these lines, these issues that we've already talked about? I mean, we haven't done a complete assessment yet of the county, have we?
That's correct. We haven't done a complete assessment. They will not be the ones implementing. They are researchers, so they are helping us to understand our county, who are the communities of color. Their first report will be an environmental scan in October. So that's the first assessment of, where we are at as a county. That information that they share with us, each of their reports will help inform the work that we do as staff. Yeah.
So do we anticipate it being in alignment with the Reimagine group?
Along with what Gary's saying, my recommendation is that if we really want to be intentional and purposeful and have sustainability with this work, it will take some time. The 30 to 60, 90 days, it may not be realistic for some of these items. Some of them, yes, because they were already well on their way. So I think that the work with the Coalition of Communities of Color will help us to inform a lot of this work that we are doing and what we might embark on in the future.
So essentially then, what will happen with the folks that we're working with, the Coalition of Communities of Color, is we're going to do assessment of who the people of color are in our county and where their demographics, where they're located. Is that going to be part of the landscape that we're going to be looking at?
In our county, what the demographics are, what are the gaps, what are the inequities, who are the people serving those communities of color, the community-based organizations, what are the cities doing, culturally specific organizations, the entire county. Yeah.
So we'll have a whole roadmap from that.
Yes.
Maybe we should just let Reimagine Oregon know that we're developing a roadmap that should align with their materials. I mean, isn't that really what we're doing?
So the roadmap will help us with a lot of these action items. The roadmap is also specifically for Clackamas County, and it will help us in creating a strategic plan, an equity, diversity, and inclusion strategic plan for the county. And so I think I see it as an overarching process, and that the things within Reimagine are definitely within that umbrella.
And Reimagine,
it's not the same thing though.
I know, that's what I was going to say, because I was going to ask Paul and Sonia, the Reimagine piece seems to be largely focused on policy development at the state level. Isn't that your sense?
So part of it is, and the state tab, Martha, when you look at it, it will have items for the legislature. It has items for Multnomah County, Clackamas County, Washington County, Metro. So different levels of things. So it's really beyond just the state, but the state items are very different than the things on our list.
Paul, what did you have to say about that? What's your...
Well, yeah. So at least on that point, Sonia's correct. They're in categories, so the different types of government. So the city of Portland and Metro, and we're different than the legislature, right? So those legislative priorities are going to be done, and reform that's going to take place at the state level. That's on them, and our portion is on us. So, so that, if that answers your question, Martha.
Yeah, kind of. I'm just curious what the outcome's going to be when we look at our demographics of who the communities of color are in Clackamas County.
Right. What I will say is that the selections on the spreadsheet, I don't know if it's changed, but sometimes they didn't really fit our timeline, for example, or didn't really, because you're kind of locked in whether it's you're going to be pursuing it or not at this time, and a number of options, but we couldn't write in our own. So it's just a matter, and we said we're waiting for for Martine to come on board, and she can help guide us through this. And here she is. She can help us guide us through. And I think Gary's suggestion or direction to Martine was adjust it as you see fit, that fits your schedule, Martine, that you think we can make something like that, and run with it. I will not be able to participate on Friday, and actually the next Friday, all the Fridays in September, I have a family matter I'm trying to resolve. So I won't be able to attend anything on Fridays from here on out, at least for the month of September. At this particular time block, by the way, not the entire day. So that time block just seems to be right in the way of it. But for the most of the day, I'm committed. So whoever, if it's going to be, if Sonia's comfortable with it, or another person wants to jump on board, there you go. Martha, if you want to jump in, there's an opening.
I'll take a look at my schedule and see. Okay, thank you, Paul, for that.
So I've had my hand raised for a while. I'm not sure if Jim's calling on people. Martine, what do you think about the advisability of, as far as person responsible, that for our items, it's the entire BCC?
Can you say more about what you're thinking about why?
Well, I'm thinking that we as a board are making the decision that these are priorities, and I don't think that any one commissioner should be the one that is responsible. I think this is important enough that it's the entire board making the decision, and that we are asking staff to work with us and to give us the information as things progress, but that it's not, I just don't think Clackamas County, we really are a collaborative board in the sense of these issues that are really, really important to us. I don't think any one of us, even though Paul and I have been on the calls for the most of it, I think it should be our whole board that is, says that we are the ones that are monitoring this, not just one commissioner.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think you as a board are committing to the things that you're saying you commit to as a whole. The point of having a lead, just like if you see on the spreadsheet, there's also an organizational lead. The point of having a lead is just to make sure that there is someone that is keeping their eye on that particular issue, and it could be more than one lead, but I don't know if all of the board members could be the lead on each of the different issues. It's just a matter of being able to make sure that there's a point of contact to address those issues. So I recommend that you have maybe at least one or two people assigned to.
All right, Ken, and then Paul.
Well, I was under the impression that the meeting on Friday was for all of us. I didn't realize it was only for the two participating members. So
It's for all.
it is for all.
Yes, the lead piece has to do with those. If you see the memo that I sent, is talking about the different items. For example, fair housing is one of the items. And if you look at that specific issue, it's asking who would be the point person, who's taking on the lead on that issue. Just like Commissioner Savas put his name down for anti-displacement, he's taking the lead, so he's going to keep an eye on that. He's going to be the point of contact for that particular issue. So that's what that's asking for. But in terms of a commitment as a board, for sure, you are all invited to these meetings. They want to see participation from the electeds. And it is a commitment that you all are making as a board. It's just a matter of determining who's the lead for each of the issues.
Okay.
All right, Paul? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So on this very topic, as far as the lead, Martine, before you are back on board with us, I think it was the very last meeting that I attended, and that they wanted just that, the point person, and that could be a staff person. I think even Drenda put her name down as that point person for one or two maybe of those items. And I even think that we mentioned your name in that. So I don't think it was exclusively electeds, and it seems to me that you could be the lead person on that, if I'm not mistaken, on our behalf, with our directions. Do you recall that, Sonia?
I think they want to pin us down as electeds for accountability. And I resist that because I want us to work as a team. I want us to establish that with this board so that as we move forward, we have a team approach. We are switching. The board is shifting in January, and I want us to establish a team on these issues. I think that's going to be important.
Anything else? Martine, are you done?
So it's not clear to me whether or not you would want to, as a board, then just say that each of you are, the board as a whole is the lead for each of those items. Is that what I'm hearing?
Okay.
They do specifically want electeds, and also just to say, of course, as a staff person in equity, diversity, and inclusion, I'm here to support you all in the work behind the scenes and supporting in that way. But they do definitely want an electeds. So mainly I wanted to come to you today just to make sure that you felt like you were up to date and ready for the Friday session so that you could share and update the Reimagine folks with where we're at.
I mean, how do other people feel about that piece? That's going to be something they're going to try to pin us down.
I have a suggestion, commissioners, that we pick one commissioner's name to be on all of these, knowing you have the full board and the staff to support you in doing it. I do not suggest you have all 5 of you by a different priority. That's very confusing. So, I mean, Commissioner Fisher, are you willing? Can we put your name down? You're the lead at Clackamas County as the elected, knowing you have all of our support.
Yeah, provided that we really team on this and that we are committed, each and every one of us, to working together like we have been. I am absolutely fine, but I'm going to tell you, Paul has been here every step of the way, except for maybe one meeting, but I need that commitment from you, Paul, for the thinking, the strategy, and support like you've been providing. You've been an excellent partner on these issues, and I really appreciated it.
Well, yeah, thanks for that. And, initially when this whole started, they were going to have 3 meetings, and that was it. So I didn't have a long-term, and I knew this whole thing through September and possibly October was coming, and didn't see a problem because this was only 3 meetings that would have already transpired, right? So I didn't see this coming. But I also thought that, what was in my wheelhouse was something that I could easily tackle. And it seems that whatever these are associated to for yourselves, my colleagues, that's more closely related to your wheelhouse, might be the appropriate person to be assigned to that. So Sonia, a lot of these things do fit your portfolio more than mine per se. I do have an interest in that. But I thought in all fairness, I just want to let everyone know that I'm not going to be able to participate until I resolve this thing, and hopefully September it's over, so.
Well, for me, I think this is a long-term project, and I'd be happy to participate as long as I'm here. But, I think that others need to step up.
Well, I mean, I would assume that we would all be participating this in our roles as county commissioners, but the actual implementation of practical policy is going to be done by staff, whether it's in the hiring process, whether it's in the public and government affairs outreach on things, whether it is making sure that our C2P2 program, as an example, definitely does in fact hire people of color and women into the trades, etc. I'm not sure that the board members as individuals, do the pragmatic part of that. It's a policy-making decision. We want equity, diversity, and inclusion principles in everything that the county does. So division by division, the idea is that how do you apply those principles in each and every division as we go forward? The board's job is to say, we want you to apply those principles in every single division as we go forward. And if that's not happening, obviously we would hear that from division directors and or from Gary Schmidt. So I guess maybe I'm a little confused as to what is expected of us in terms of the hands-on aspect of things, which is not normally what a policy-making body does.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in on that. I think I can answer that question, Ken. I don't think it's that dissimilar to some of our committees we sit on where we know we're not doing, like, I'm not going to be out there designing a road, but I am the representative on transportation, right? So I'm part of the policy making, so to speak. I'm the contact. I assume that responsibility, but obviously our staff do the support work thereof. This is,
okay,
as I think Martine said it, and Sonia said it as well, this is relatively a political structure made and invited for policymakers, political people, elected people, to make sure that the pressure is on them to keep on our staff, to make sure that we follow through with our boards. And so there's accountability to some degree, political accountability. So it's not expected that because my name's on it or your name's on it, that we're going to be doing all of that pragmatic staff level work. We're not.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, then if Sonia is the lead person on this, then the expectation is that she would be tracking what's being done and letting us know what is or isn't being done and what support, excuse me, that she would need from the board to make sure that things that aren't being done do get done. Is that a simplified version of what you're saying?
Yeah, but I would say that, Ken, if one of those appeals to you more than another, that maybe you could help us all out and take on one of those yourself. And then if one of those appeals to maybe Jim and we share the load, and Martha, we share the load so that we're all helping move this.
I know that I would be interested in the fair housing piece, number one, because I've worked at that on the NACO level as well. And I don't think that affirmatively further fair housing is, for some reason, I don't think it's required by HUD, but I still, anymore, I'd have to check that out. But that's something that we already have a document available. Chuck did it before he left, that we could dig up and take a look at. But it was with intent we were one of the first counties to move forward with when this was a mandate from the federal government to actually come up with the framework. So we need to just find out where that is. When I look at this list, that's the one I would be interested in. That makes sense to me.
And I would say for me, the employment one would probably be the one that would interest me the most.
Where's the one? Okay.
Commissioners, we're way behind schedule.
Let's go.
I offer to you, if Commissioner Fisher is willing, she would be like the liaison, just like most of you are liaisons to various projects. She is not doing this all herself. She's just a liaison to make sure it's getting done with all of your support. Or we could put all your names by these individual lists, and we need to decide that today. So what would you like to do?
And like I said, I'm willing to do this provided that my board is right there along with me. I will not do this as a what's a renegade, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Rogue?
Rogue, that's it, rogue.
The Lone Ranger?
The Lone Ranger. We're gonna need time on our issue sessions to strategize things, and I really would welcome and invite every commissioner for any meeting who can participate to do it, to be there as they're able.
Okay, I'd say you have my commitment. I mean, criminal justice is an area of interest to me, so. So let's, you're the liaison. We've got our support, and where we can, areas that we feel we might have some expertise or some interest, we'll be there for you. Okay?
Okay.
Martine, you good? All right, Gary, let's move on.
Okay, great. First, I want to clarify the call with the governor. I apologize, commissioners. It is meant for county chairs only. It is not open for all county commissioners, county chairs only. So Chair Bernard is going to leave here in 16 minutes to be on that call, and we'll continue with policy sessions, commissioners, as scheduled. With that, next is 2020 state legislative session review. We have the Public and Government Affairs team, Sue Hilda, Chris Lyons, Trent Wilson. Take the time you need, but as efficiently as you can, please. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, commissioners. We've had 3 sessions of the legislature in the last few months, and I want to give you an update. You knew about the February session in which the NCPRD bill passed, and then we've had 2 special sessions related to COVID, one in June and one in August. So Chris and Trent and our colleagues, Northwest Public Affairs, have been point on those, and they're going to fill you in on the impacts for the county. Chris?
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. So I'll run us through the background on the 3 sessions, and then Trent will walk us through some of the special session bills and how they impacted Clackamas County. So first, with the regular 2020 session, the short session, which seems like a lifetime ago, that began February 3rd and lasted just over a month. You'll recall walking into session, the Democratic majorities were intent on passing climate change legislation. That was the one item they failed to pass, the one big ticket item they failed to pass in 2019. So 2 weeks into the short session, as a way to prevent that bill from passing, and like they did in 2019, the Senate Republicans walked out and denied quorum for business to take place. And then the House Republicans walked out shortly thereafter. And they never returned, and session essentially ended, having passed only 3 bills out of almost 300 bills that were introduced, including about 50 budget bills. So on page 3 of your packet, you can see a list of all the bills that we worked closely on and tracked, but I'm going to highlight just 3 of them. Sue mentioned the North Clackamas Parks and Rec District bill. You'll recall that is the one that statutorily removes Happy Valley from NCPRD. We worked very closely with Happy Valley, with Reps Bynum and Meek on that, and the bill was prioritized to be passed as quickly as possible, knowing that session may end early, as it ended up doing. And it ended up being the first bill to pass both chambers, and the very first bill of the 3, or actually it's one of the 3 that passed the entire session. So fortunately that one got taken care of. I-205 was another priority issue we focused on. Rep. Prusak pushed an amendment to a bill that would have reprioritized Rose Quarter dollars to the 205 project, given how ready the 205 project is. And the Clackamas Caucus, we worked closely with them, and they rallied around that amendment. Chair Bernard testified in support of that, along with a number of local leaders and state legislators. But then there was also vehement opposition from other stakeholders, including the architects behind HB 2017. And the amendment ultimately failed, but it did elevate that issue of 205 even more publicly than it already was. So we're continuing to push that issue, and it has much more momentum as a result. So a big thank you to our legislators who really rallied behind that issue. And then the third bill, the Willamette Falls locks, you'll recall that we are working to try to get a public corporation established for that issue, as well as some state funding. And that bill was on the cusp of passage. It had already passed the House, and it was on the cusp of passage in the Senate. I think it was on the second reading list right before the Senate Republicans walked out. So we were so close. So I am confident that will come back in probably the upcoming long session in 2021. And there were a host of other priority issues, but they all failed because of the lack of quorum. The day after the session, the Legislative E-Board met to pass emergency funding for Umatilla flooding, for COVID response, for emergency preparedness, and for greenhouse gas emission issues. And right around that same time, the governor announced an executive order on climate change, where she directed state agencies to reduce and regulate greenhouse emissions because there was not that, that legislative passage of the bill to put it in statute. So that work is now underway by state agencies. That takes us to the first special session. But prior to that, in early May, PGA, anticipating there would be a big legislative focus on COVID, we developed and the board approved a state and federal COVID-19 legislative agenda of principles that guided our work. So that was very helpful. And then sure enough, 3 months into the pandemic, the governor called a special session on June 24th to address COVID-19 and calls for increased accountability in public safety stemming from the death of George Floyd. That special session really introduced a new way of doing legislative business. Only legislators were really let inside the building. There was limited public testimony. Bills were released just 48 hours before hearings, and all of the bills, 23 of them, were passed within 72 hours of when they were unveiled. So Trent will walk us through some of those bills here in a minute, and those begin on page 37 of your packet. And then finally, on the second special session, following the conclusion of the first session, the governor stated she would convene a second special session to take up issues relating to the state budget in light of the declining state revenues because of the pandemic. And a month and a half later, that second special session was convened on August 10th. It lasted 15 hours, where they passed 10 of the 11 bills that were introduced. And just like on the first special session, the public process was very poor. Bills were released just about 24 hours before the hearings, and no testimony was allowed at the committees. And those bills are on page 53 of your packet. And that brings us up to today. There have been recently some rumors swirling about a week or two ago that there would be a third special session, but at this point, we don't expect that to happen anymore. There is legislative days coming up here in 2 to 3 weeks where they will be focusing on issues, but not a special session. So with that, I think that's the background, and Trent will take it from here and walk you through some of the bills that have an impact on the county.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, commissioners. Yes, a lot to go through here, but respecting your time and noting Gary's comment earlier, I think I can hit the really high points here. During the first special session, there were a couple of bills that were, I think, really key, and that's House Bill 4212 and House Bill 4213. That's in page 37 of the packet, as Chris mentioned, for those listening. And what that did, it was an omnibus catch-all bill, as well as a residential and commercial eviction extension. That really just codified a lot of the work that the governor's office, the state, and the county was working on in the early days of COVID to respond and really just give permanent authority for us to have that emergency response. And so it was the legislature catching up to those governor orders and emergency declarations that we were all making. As Chris mentioned, there was a host of public safety bills that went through. I think for our purposes here at the county, we were, I think, encouraged by the Oregon Sheriff's Association, working diligently with the legislators who were moving that information forward. And so there was a lot of support from our Sheriff's Department in that. And we believe that the Sheriff's Department's already practicing and or training in the direction of those bills anyway. And so great work by our Sheriff's Department in that direction. Senate Bill 1604, page 40 of your packet. This is the one that I believe there was commissioner interest before. Details the discipline and arbitration rules for public safety officials. And in terms of what that means for the county, our HR department is working with the Sheriff's Department to do a deep dive into what that looks like, making sure that we're coordinating with our employment force there. On an off-topic one, but not totally off topic, is Senate Bill 1601 from the first session. This changes how to use the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, sometimes called the STIF, which was authorized in 2017 for interconnectivity between transit agencies. This bill in this session allowed use of that funding for operations, which is going to allow a lot of our public transit agencies to be able to continue having funds during the pandemic. There's a couple bills, a little unrelated. One is about forestry and another is about broadband. The forestry bill would require owners of properties to pay for mediation during environmental disputes. We don't have any ongoing here at the county, but if we were to ever have one, the county would probably have to pay for that mediation. And the one for broadband just changed how the universal service surcharge is, how that funding can be used. And so that might be an opportunity for us in the future, knowing that there's a lot of interest in our board or on our board on how to pursue broadband expansion in the future. Probably the one that caught the attention of most of our departments, or a variety of our departments outside of the direct COVID response, is the driving privilege suspension bill. That's House Bill 4210 on page 42 of the packet. We have mixed positions on our departments because this allowed people who receive traffic violations, gives them the ability to not pay their fine. Well, it doesn't give them the ability to not pay their fine. They should still pay their fine, but their license doesn't have to be suspended if they don't pay their fine. And so from the Justice Court's perspective, from our Drive to Zero perspective, certainly that creates some questions on, what does that mean in terms of enforcement of law? What does that mean for encouraging safe practices? However, on the social service side, many of the people who were losing their license because of their inability to pay fines were people who were low or middle income families, needed their license to get to work. And in some cases, that loss of driver's license would put them in a harder situation to provide for their families. And so again, a mixed position there, or has a lot of different impacts across the county, but nothing directly to our services exactly. So that's the first session. And then the second session, very quickly, the two bills to focus on here are House Bill 4304 and Senate Bill 5723. These were statutory amendments and a budget rebalance, or sort of an omnibus budget adjustment. This is the state's response to trying to understand how the budget impacts from COVID are impacting state agencies. The biggest impact to the county was a reduction in funding for the law library, about 25% of the budgets for law libraries statewide, including our own. So that's a big hit to our law library department that's already working on a pretty limited budget, as you know from our previous budget sessions. Everything else seems to have more peripheral impacts from those budget bills. One to note here, though, or one peripheral impact that's important to us in particular, is the removal of Lynn County and Lane County's state match funding for their courthouses. And the big takeaway here is that the legislature will have keen eyes on Clackamas County's courthouse funding plan during the 21 session, because as you know, that is part of our big ask, as Chris has mentioned in the past. So let's take it to heart that they are serious about what's available and what's not available for when that comes back around. And that's the very quick version of county impacts from the two special sessions.
Just a second. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you guys for the great work you did. Getting those bills through right before session, walked out. Great job. Thank you.
Thanks, and we'll see you again in about a month to discuss the 2021 session and possible priorities.
All right, thank you. And Gary, I will be leaving, and Martha, you're in charge.
All right, thank you, Chair Bernard. Chair Schrader, you're on mute. All right, but if you allow, we'll go forward. For the last policy session of the day, it's a vendor rewards policy. We have Elizabeth Comfort and Andrew Naylor. So please bring them in the room. And I think this can be a very quick conversation.
It can too.
Elizabeth or Andrew, whoever is leading, please go ahead.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay. Good morning, commissioners. Before you is a proposed policy that would authorize employees to use certain reward accounts as part of, it'll essentially be part of their compensation package. And what we're referring to in this policy are things like your Fred Meyer reward account, your airline miles, things like that. This policy allows employees in certain situations to use their personal account numbers. The caveats being they can't do it if it's going to result in them choosing a more expensive option to the county, or if a specific department had already established a policy. So the reason why we have to make this part of the official compensation package is because under Oregon ethics law, you cannot use your position as a public employee to have a financial benefit or avoid a financial detriment that you otherwise would have but for your employment. Arguably, using your personal reward account would create an ethics violation. We can avoid that by making it part of the official compensation package, which is what this policy is intended to do. So I think that is the 30,000-foot view of the policy. Elizabeth, did I miss anything?
Nope, you got it.
So the policy has been issued to the unions. So we have satisfied our 14-day notice requirement. And as of yesterday, there was no request to bargain as a result of it. So if this board was so inclined, we could pass it today with no further issues. But of course, if the board has any questions, concerns, proposed revisions, please let us know. And I will open it up to questions from there.
I want to start, Andrew. So why is this going before the Board of County Commissioners? Because normally the administrator approves policies. Can you explain that, please?
Right. There's two components to that. The first is that it would apply to elected officials. So it would include this board. So it's a broader sweep than a typical county policy. The second is that in order to comply with the Oregon Ethics Act, it has to be part of the employee's official compensation package, which is, again, something that would need to be presented to this board. It makes it, there's a definition in the regulations. It requires something a little more formal than just adoption of a policy. So those are the two reasons why this is coming before this board.
Christina, I'll do it. Commissioner Fisher, do you have a comment?
So I've read reviewed the materials, but I'm just confused a little bit. So I'll just ask my questions. So are public officials then, if this is an extra value, taxed on these benefits?
They could be. Tax responsibility would be for the individual public official. So if you receive, for example, a huge Costco return by using your personal account, if it ends up being something that's authorized, that could be the individual's personal responsibility. And our policy makes it clear that the county is not responsible for any tax responsibilities. That's on the employee itself to figure out and to pay if necessary.
So if an employee uses their own rewards cards, then they have to keep track of that, and they have to count that as additional compensation when they do their taxes, so they will pay tax on it.
Right. We put the onus on all tax responsibility on the employee.
Okay. I mean, it always, when I became a commissioner, it just seemed kind of strange to me. And I knew it was the practice that you could use your personal air miles, but I just set up separate air miles accounts when I traveled as the county to not lose that benefit. But it didn't seem right that a public official could benefit personally from that county travel. Just seemed it seemed wrong to me. So I set up different miles accounts.
And this is what the policy is attempting to address, to let people know when they can do it and when they can't, and to make their use of it for their personal benefit in compliance with the act. So we don't want anyone getting in trouble.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't have the opportunity to see hands up. So.
No further hands up right now.
Further hands, okay.
So commissioners, do you approve this policy? And Andrew, can they do it right now, or does it have to be at a business meeting?
They can approve it now. It doesn't need an order. A voice vote is fine.
So then, Gary, we need a motion.
Yes, please.
Can I ask for a motion? I'll do it. I move approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's do the poll.
Okay, Commissioner Fisher,
No.
Commissioner Humbertson. Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Or mute.
No.
Commissioner Savas,
Okay, apparently I'm missing something, so I'm gonna, well, we're not going anywhere. I'm gonna abstain, so I'd like to know what the issue is that my colleagues voted no on.
All right,
I'm
well,
gonna
let's,
abstain for order of
so
the,
why don't we go into discussion then? Why are the reasons we have 2 no's?
I'm happy to speak first.
Sure.
I just think there's a perception potential of it being unfair and unethical. I understand what you're trying to do to make it, by the letter of the law, but I think we are well compensated, quite frankly, for the jobs that we have, and that just strikes me as something that's going to be perceived by the general public as unethical or unfair. So, and I don't feel any need to have it. So, I'd rather not go down the road of even having a negative public perception on something like that.
Commissioner Fisher, do you feel the same way?
Well, I just have a concern, and it says as a person who's worked for government, when I started my work at age 22 and in and out of my career, I've just always had a problem with whenever there was an employee or using their position for personal gain. I just, financially, I just don't think that it promotes the public trust. And for me, I think having the public trust is of our most critical importance. And I don't feel comfortable benefiting from airline miles or rewards cards. I'm absolutely all about getting those rewards and having that benefit the county. So for the airline miles, my Hilton honors that it's in there under a different name. I'm all about that. I think we should capitalize that, but it should be used for public good to reduce future costs for the taxpayer.
Paul, does that help?
That helps a little bit, but maybe I misunderstood, and I'm not feeling very good because by the time the afternoon gets on, my neck back thing is just hurting like there's no tomorrow. So I'm not as sharp as I would normally be, but I thought Andrew said that the employee or us would be personally responsible for those benefits, and it would be upon us or them to report that. So it seems to me that it plays into the concerns or alleviates the concerns my colleagues just stated. So do I have it backwards?
Maybe staff give us some clarity. Yeah. Andrew.
As to the personal reporting obligations, that was referring to whether there's tax liability arising from receiving the benefits. And the way we drafted the policy is that tax liability is the responsibility of the employee, not the county, to resolve. So that was the only reporting component of this. It wasn't a broader responsibility of employees to report. But all ethics compliance is personal to the employee itself. So I mean that's just by nature of the statute, that compliance with ORS 244, it's on the individual employee. The county isn't going to be responsible for those violations. They're personal violations. So if somebody abuses the policy or exceeds the scope of it, that is a personal violation.
So we're not, but and so to further clarify, and that's how I interpreted what you said earlier. To further clarify, there's no new benefit being received by our employees or ourselves. It's just the existing indirect benefit of, let's say, rewards and so forth, that is somewhat now being shifted from a responsibility, or not, well, an unclear responsibility, but now being shifted to the recipient that's using those to report, if they choose, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. My understanding of how this policy arose is that some employees were using personal benefits, and it wasn't clear whether they were allowed to do so or not. So the decision from the folks who met to come up with this policy was, do we allow it or we just say no? And so collectively, the group decided to put together a policy that would allow it, which is the policy you have before you. It can certainly go the other way. It can go back to no, we're not going to allow this, which is just as simple and easy to put together. But if we were to allow it, it has to go before the board, which is why we're here. So I'm not sure if that fully answered your question, but that was sort of the background impetus for how this came about.
Okay, so not allowing it results in, give me an example or two of what that results in if it's not allowed.
We would just tell employees they're not allowed to use personal accounts. So when they do purchases at Fred Meyer Safeway, it has to be a county account or no account at all. They use airline miles, they can't use their personal one. It would be as simple as that.
Okay. Gary, you wanted to say something.
Yes, so first I suggest we table this so that staff can do a little bit more background work and come back to you with options. One option is this can be for employees only and we'd exempt elected officials, or we do it countywide. If this was for employees only, I would approve this because right now there's no guidance. So some employees are using their points, others are not. And this policy really strengthens the expectation that yes, this is a taxable reward for you. And so if you are using it, then you're accountable to it. So in my opinion, this gives more accountability than what we have today. However, I do feel I'm requesting to table this so staff can revisit this and then come back to you again with a clear option.
I think that's a great idea. So do I need to move to remove the table?
If y'all kind of head out that, that's fine.
Commissioner Humberson has his hand up.
Yes, Commissioner Humberson.
Well, two things. One is just as an analogy, when we drive on county business, we get compensated for gas for driving on county business, but we don't get any extra reward. When we get on an airplane on county business, we don't get an extra, I don't think we should get an extra reward. That being said, I'd move the table.
Okay, I'll second that. Let's table it and revisit.
So I have my hand up, and sorry to butt in. But,
I know
since Martha can't see my hand, Gary, I see airline miles differently than I see your Fred Meyer and then getting reimbursed later. I see them different. I don't know why. I mean, I just think that if you're using up your miles and then using up that from county travel and then buying your own personal vacation later, that's an issue for me. But for ease of continuity and less transaction cost and simplicity to just, if you're doing, I just see it differently. So maybe that's some direction to staff. But in my mind, it's doesn't matter. You're serving at the public good as a public servant if you're an employee or you're an elected official. I see it all as we need to act to an ethical standard and not give the impression of right, government employees benefiting personally. So
I understand.
Commissioner Savas has his hand up.
All right, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I'll just close with this. I just thought that there was at least some validity in raising the ethical bar by acknowledging and reporting that appealed to me. And if it's not I just see it as an indirect benefit. If it's used, it's not used. For example, I don't capitalize at all or apply any airline credits for any travel related to the county business. So I don't even do that because it just doesn't feel right. So I don't even use it. But it is revenue that's kind of somewhat lost, right? Because if I did, there's no extra cost to the county to do it. And therefore, it seems incumbent upon me that if I receive the benefit that I use that, and it's not a cost to the public, that I should be reporting it. And I thought that raising the bar that way was the ethical thing to do.
So what I'm hearing is that we've got a motion to table with a second. Should we just take the poll and then revisit this? Because what I'm hearing is that we may want to do this for employees, but not necessarily commissioners, but that's a whole nother discussion, because we feel uncomfortable with that.
We'll bring all this back to you with several options, commissioners.
All right. So I think, though, do we have to vote, Gary, to table?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Humbertson?
Aye.
Commissioner Samus?
All right.
And Chair Schrader?
Aye.
Then
Okay.
Andrew has his hand up as well.
Yes, Andrew, what's up?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify from my end, when I come back before you, this board is looking for not just a yes option, but a suite of options ranging from no to anywhere between to what you had before you today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, what would be the detriment to have if employees are we're not flying now because it's COVID, but COVID's going to end. What if they had separate mileage that would then benefit the county? Because I don't think that the public entity should lose that benefit, but that it should be used for travel, used to offset future travel costs.
I personally am not aware of how airlines handle like institutional airline mile plans. Maybe they do. Elizabeth, do you have any insight on that? And we
I
can
can
certainly look
answer
into
this.
that.
So my personal example, I'm Alaska Airlines. I'm a gold member of Alaska Airlines because of my personal travel through Toastmasters. I get a discount on my flights that I use when I purchase county flights. So in a way, I am using my personal rewards to benefit Clackamas County's public ratepayers because I'm getting a lower airfare on my own dime. Yet, I also am collecting miles when I fly on the county's dime, which I then report to the finance department every year. Here's how many miles I've flown, and they add like 10 cents to my payroll check for the year. So that's what's happening now in the absence of a policy. I feel comfortable doing this. I'm not taking from the public. I'm actually giving to the public by having a personal rewards card. That's one example.
Okay, that's good to consider. So we'll just revisit this then. And when will we revisit it, Gary?
The next week, before the end of the year.
Okay, that's okay. This doesn't sound. I'm looking outside right now in Lake Oswego, and it's looking pretty grim out. So I think we have other priorities right now. So
Okay, thank you, Andrew and Elizabeth. We'll revisit and bring this back to the board in the next few months. That is your last policy session for the day, Chair. So you're done.
we're adjourned. All right.
So question, Gary, any other updates on any fire stuff? I just got some emails about Lincoln City's, they're evacuating all of it. Things are looking pretty good. Any other updates that you have for us?
I've not had any yet, but look, this is severe, commissioners. This is very bad for our entire state and for Clackamas County. You can look out the window and see that. I'm not aware of any other spread of further fires, but the winds have not stopped, and they're going to continue through tomorrow. So we're not out of danger yet. I should have an update for you in about an hour, and I'll email you.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Take care.
Appreciate it. Goodbye, everybody.